Defendant Michelle N. Olson, assert the claim. It is pertinent to point out that my petition today is that of much broader grounds than just simply terminating the guardianship of my two children, Ivy Quinn and Lila Mae Olson, for my desires. As previously stated by guardian Christine M. Olson, as the reports and recommendations by Julio Quinones have contained much misleading and false information provided by guardian herself, I genuinely do not have a complete disregard for my children's emotional health nor well-being. For their well-being in all aspects is all I genuinely do care about. It is much more important to me than others have portrayed and had no right to do so. Due to the petition and hearings held on guardianship of my two children, filed by Christine Marie Olson on July 30th, 2020, commencing, appointment, and lack of communication ultimately withheld by me maliciously by guardian, I had not been given the opportunity for equal and fair chance for self-defense to object or even had a word regarding the matter, as my due process had been utterly severed before I had even known actions were in place. Christine had withheld information from the courts upon her original petition and was dishonest under oath throughout the entire process. She had created many falsehoods about me and who I am as a mother in person. I want to point out the fact that Christine hardly had a prior existing relationship with my children and had not been a part of our private life previous. Therefore, she has no factual grounds to state all that she has about myself and my children's life before guardianship and even afterward. Christine Olson had been dishonest to the courts regarding my personal life, my status at the time, my location, communication, my history, and the reasons as to why she even had my children in her care to begin with. Christine's petition and obtaining of guardianship had been based entirely off of dishonesty altogether. The judgment in itself had been fraudulently supported that Christine Olson had misrepresented to me, the courts and other parties involved with the matter, to obtain signatures on Form GC 211, and the signature on my GC 211 is forged. That is not my signature. She had created countless falsehoods upon my name. To the eyes of the court, Christine's actions are suspected for upper hand throughout the process. So I may not have the proper ability to fight back against her wrongdoings, and she may be allowed to paint this horrid picture of me, heavily labeling me as been given lousy faith to the court's opinion before I had ever gotten the fighting chance at self-defense. As Christine had as well abused the system and continues to abuse the system of laws, committing many torts such as libel, false accusations of abuse with absolutely no grounds of evidence presented. She has caused a gap of importance between the extraordinary bond my two children and I had shared all of their lives, restricting and denying visitation and contact with my children during the entire duration of my absence, including during the time she had no rights to do so before the appointment of court-involved guardianship, and without termination of parental rights, violating my rights as a parent and my children's right to each parent as the First Amendment protected close family and tortious interference with the parent-child relationship, care, custody, and bond. Christine had also filed and obtained a complete false DVRO against me to make it more complicated for me to return my children home successfully. It was only won by dismissal due to being given the wrong time of the hearing, as well as my mother, Doreen Kaler, being shown the wrong time by the clerks of Butte County Superior Court, as they stated the hearing would be held at 8:30 a.m. The web page for Butte County itself displays the hours of operation to be 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Friday. Living 5 hours away, I had shown up what I thought was 10 minutes early when Baliv had then informed me that I was 10 minutes too late. The hearing was held at 8:15 a.m. instead due to the telephonic appearance of the other party, Christine. Christine Olson had told the family court that I demanded my children back from staff of Butte County Behavioral Health, and told probate court that I had attempted to abduct my children from Butte County Behavioral Health, as neither event had taken place. Butte County Behavioral Health also has no record of this event ever occurring because it had not. Both statements provided by Christine vary greatly. The difference in wording is very critical to my case. Christine has as well severed the bond between all existing family relationships with my two children, including grandmother Doreen Kaler and 11-year-old sibling, brother, Eden Burdett, cutting off all communication and isolating my two children, and completely disregarding their emotional and mental well-being from their natural familiarized home and family life setting. By doing this, Christine is disrupting the two children's developmental states at this very tender age in their very young lives, suspected alienation, bias, and abuse to at least one of my children, eldest, Ivy Quinn Olson, 7 years. Christine has placed my children in harm's way by allowing a man, Adam Lure, with a 10-day sexual abuse within the CWS system, claims that Mr. Lure had molested his younger sibling, and the victim, Brianna Wilson, C. Old, not be contacted and was never further investigated to be alone with my children. daily, and live under the same roof as my two little girls, as well putting them in harm's way by allowing my children to witness violence of a physical fight between her father, Michael Olson, and Mr. Lure, while at 4516 Shade Road, La Mesa home in October 2021, I had been informed the fight had gotten quite violent, and my two very young children had seen everything. That sort of environment is detrimental for any child. By this and many other events, Christine had disrupted the safety, well-being, and wellness of my two children and has shown her own careless and irresponsible behavior, which concerns me as a mother. By Christine, countless negative actions and by isolating my children has only proved to me that Christine does not have my children's best interest at heart. And never has, and has only been ignoring the fundamental importance of my children's development as minor children as they're highly absorbent to surroundings during developmental stages. She has put their future outcomes into adulthood at risk of adverse effects and negative repercussions for their futures. Christina Olson has slandered, committed perjury, fraud, breach of contract. She has lied to court investigator Julio Quinones, social worker, the judges, and courts entirely, as well myself. And my family as well had been dishonest regarding her criminal record, stating she had never been arrested on reports and recommendations reports. I had found her mugshots for theft by deception as well. She had previously, 2001 to 2002, taken off with her two children when her ex-husband M.R. Dorman had gained custody and permission to move their two children, Brandolyn and Christopher Dorman, to Germany away from their mother for over a year. She was then labeled as a flight risk and had 5 arrest warrants for theft by deception plus 2 criminal summons for bad checks, 4 active warrants for failure to pay, 2 criminal summons for more bad checks, etc. within Ventura County, California. She has lied regarding her total marriages. Kristen leaves out 2 marriages within her intake to Matthew D. Carroll, whom she was married to simultaneously with Keith Triplum, has 2 tax fraud charges against her, and had taken off with $84,000 that belonged to Mr. Carroll during a settlement. She has this history of committing bigamy, and she leaves out the marriage to James Jimmy Yingling, whom you can even find within Duke County's court system itself. Christine had placed a DVRO against Mr. Yingling, lifted the order, and put it back on him, attempted to lift again, and it got denied by Sandra McLean. This is not to incriminate anyone, it is to show that Christine Olson is dishonest and is not a safe care provider for my 2 children. She has as well disobeyed the court's orders, such as suggesting to the children regarding coming home, discussing court involvement with the children that had been clearly stated during the November 30th hearing. Contesting of guardianship by David Green, that there would be no talk about court-involved matters and no talk about bringing the children home. I believe Christine had unknowingly admitted she had broken this order. When Mr. Quinones had issued his termination of guardianship report and recommendation on April 8, 2021 on page 4 under Christine's logs for January 10th, the Christine states she called. When they were off the phone, Ivy was worried she was going back to her mother's and grandmother's home soon. Ivy had a tantrum at bedtime. She got on her knees saying she would bow to us. When we asked where that came from, she said she didn't know. Ivy wet the bed that night. That alone concerns me. Ivy had told my mother, Doreen Kaler, October 2020, when she visited the children at Chico home of Christine's, that she misses home and wants to go home. When can I go home? My daughter Ivy had also said to me one day on webcam, can I go now? I asked her, you want to get off the phone? Ivy says, no, can I go home now? That breaks my heart. My children want to go home. They quite obviously do not want to be where they currently are placed, and their wants and needs should be above anyone else. I believe Christine does not have good intentions with my children. I think she's using them for 2 reasons, financial gain and for filling the empty void she left herself with when she was unable to raise her children due to her actions. As Christine has a history of trying to take children, I later find out Christine and M.R. Lure had even attempted to take 2 out of 4, I believe, of Mr. Lure's children from his ex-wife Heather. Just before Christine and Adam picked up my 2 children in Crescent City, California, forced to give them back to their mother and having used emergency custody as well COVID-19 to their advantage. Christine has in her past stated she so badly wanted to foster to adopt, as I have come across the messages between us, where she had in the past many times spoken about this, and asked me to carry her baby because she can no longer have children. Needless to say, it gave me chills and filled me with regret forever asking my sister for her temporary assistance with caring for my 2 children. For she has quite apparently made it a goal to keep them for good without ever having the intention initially promised within our original agreement signed June 29, 2020, where it was pledged to no court involvement. Christine having signed to surrender my children at my request and notarized in Del Norte County, Christine had as well marked in green ink, and green ink does not show on monochrome printouts, and the courts use monochrome printouts, therefore. If she had shown the courts, they would have made copies and her signature would not appear. However, she had sent me a PDF directly through Facebook Messenger that is color and shows her signature to surrender my children at my request. Quite clearly, the agreement was only for 6 months unless I felt it was safe to take my children back into my care sooner. It was understood as justice and that I would be given my children back at my request, which is safe to state Christine had misrepresented and lied to me entirely, as well as this contract. The reasons as to why she even had my children was because I had asked for her temporary assistance during a significant time of crisis that I had not construed and I had no control over. We had been harassed and taunted by the public and officials because my ex-boyfriend made a stupid decision. We had nothing to do with it by any means, and then Mr. Greenlilla's father had taken off the 2 girls. I attempted to issue an Amber Alert. He was arrested the next day, and I had picked them up in Elko, NV, where their CPs had conducted their mandatory interviews between myself and my mother separately and immediately released my children back into my care, without any further concerns or questions, simply because there had been no findings of my being an unfit mother to my children. I had then come to the idea I would put my trust into my sister, whom I trusted dearly with all of my life, and believed her lies, as she saw an opportunity to get children as she desired. Finally, I had only sought assistance to get my children to a haven away from the chaotic events, for Mr. Green's abduction had been the very cherry on top, and my children did not need to see nor witness anything else. So until all had then subsided, I asked Christina originally if my 2 children and I could come alongside to her Chico home until Mr. Thornley was found and arrested. I had felt it was safe to return home with my children, and Christine had denied me and accepted my children. She had told me she did not want the police attention due to a custody battle between Mr. Lure and his ex-wife. I accepted what I could for my children's well-being. With that being said, I firmly believe I did the absolute correct thing by seeking a haven for my 2 children, just choosing the wrong person to ask for help. I had gone to my sister with my trust 100% in her. I had no control over what had been happening at the time, and I had not created that issue. She agreed to act as a haven for my children, and promised me that when I had felt it was necessary, I could get my children, and I would be able to freely speak with my children and see them as I had pleased. She had misled me into believing her promise of no court involvement, for she knew I had not understood any bit of the world of legality, promising me no funny business and not to pull the stunts in which she had. She had abandoned entirely her word and this agreement we had notarized, and went behind my back to obtain this guardianship without ever notifying me. Lousy service. The GC 211 form is not my signature by any means and should be further looked into. Christina Olson has been entirely dishonest regarding all claims she has made against me and has never witnessed any events that occurred. She has never had the right to assert all that she has, and it is unfair to accept all she has said and presume to be the truth when it is not. Nothing she has stated is factual, and all lack evidence. I have never once been a bad mother in my entire life. I have never neglected my children nor abused my children. I never punished my children. And I never ignored my children. I never had ill intent with my children and only had their very best of wellness in my mind and actions with my children. I did as well like to add that I find it very important to point out is a tremendous amount of differences between an individual who is set out to destroy with vindictive behavior and made up stories to express to an investigator regarding a critical topic, and attempts to gain back their children within their care, for those who genuinely don't have good intentions and those who are less than deserving to their children and have had their children either removed from their care, or they had given up on their children simply because they no longer wanted to be responsible for said child. Then an individual, a mother, who is genuinely concerned for her children's safety and deserving of her children, never had her children removed and never decided she had not wanted the responsibility. I gave birth to my children with the full intent to take care of them to the best of my abilities and love them with everything I am. I am a mother who truly cares and loves her children more than anything in this entire world. I have always had my children's best interest at heart. I have always provided a safe, stable, and loving environment for my children, and when a threat to that safety surfaced, I had immediately sought a haven for my children to get them away from it, and that being said, I had done the correct thing, just sought help from the wrong person. Not in a million years would I have ever suspected my sister to have been the absolute wrong and regrettable person to seek help from. Not ever had I suspected she would pull the appalling stunt she has and steal my children from me altogether. Lied to the courts, forged my signatures. I had no idea my sister was a criminal such as she is. A lot of people do not, I suppose. She is very good at disguising her true nature, and for that, I deeply regret the biggest mistake of my entire life by trusting her with my children. However, I have not done anything wrong, and I find it incredibly outrageous that any one person involved could state any different. Mr. Dorman, Christine's daughter, and many others have stated Christine was found to be an unfit mother provider, unstable, being abusive, and a flight risk. Therefore, I defendant argues that there have been changed circumstances for Christine Oslin's past behavior, as she appears to be conflicting those exact tactics upon my children included in this guardianship current. I had warned Mr. Quinones, the police, CPS, and CLERCs that I feared Christine Olsen would be a flight risk. Should she find out that I knew about her lying under oath and filing for termination guardianship, no one listened. Mr. Quinones told me that it would be illegal for Christine to take off with my children. The police refused a wellness check. The clerks didn't know what to do. 2 days before the evidentiary hearing for termination of guardianship, Christine suddenly attempted to obtain a lawyer, Michael Berry, who was thrown out for conflict of interest. She sells her Chico home and leaves with my children, giving no word of warning to the courts nor myself. I feel it is imperative to bring to light the dishonesty of Christine Olsen and the illegal activities she is construing to obtain and keep what she wants, that being guardianship of Ivy Olsen and Lila Olsen. My children and I had a very close 24.7 day-to-day based relationship since their births. Therefore, I believe asking for this termination of guardianship to be granted and my children to be returned home to me is more than the right thing to have granted. As I had before, I can and will adequately care for my children in all aspects. I can provide food, clothing, shelter, a loving home, a stable home environment in the home they have grown up in, education, proper mental health care, physical care, etc. I had always provided for my children. Mr. Thornerly has been in prison for a year now, and we had not even spoken for over a year. I cut him out of my life, entirely, and Mr. Green is gone. Therefore, all matters that had started this guardianship to begin with by my reasons on asking Christine Olsen for her assistance on June 24, 2020, have all now gone away, and this guardianship is no longer necessary. I declare under the penalty of perjury of California law that the foregoing is true and correct. Defendant and biological mother Michelle N. Olsen.